Welcome back to our channel, Elementary My Dear,
where we make nutrition science easy for you to digest.
Today we're talking about creatine supplements.
Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss one of our videos.
First of all, what is creatine? Creatine is a naturally occurring compound, and its main role is to actually regenerate adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, which is the main energy source.
If you think back to grade 11 biology class, you might recognize that word ATP. And the way that it gives your body energy is by breaking off that final P. The triphosphate becomes a diphosphate. And that releases a lot of chemical energy that your cells use to do all their processes. The thing is ADP is kind of useless now. Well, it's not, but kind of useless now. And so it needs to become ATP again. And there's a few different ways that your body can do this, but one of the fastest ways is by using creatine in its form phosphocreatine, which then so kindly donates its phosphate group to the ADP to make it ATP again, so it can make even more energy for your cells.
So this type of energy production is especially important for very quick, short bursts of energy, which is why we actually find that most of the creatine is found in our muscle tissue. Now you might be wondering, well, where do we get creatine from? There are two different ways. Our bodies are able to produce creatine, and we can also get creatine from our food. Our bodies can make creatine in our liver and our kidney through two amino acids, arginine and glycine. And then to turn into phosphocreatine, which is the generous donor that ends up donating that phosphate group, there's actually an enzyme called creatine kinase, which is able to add a phosphate group to the creatine.
The second way that you get creatine is actually through food. So as we mentioned, creatine is found really in large part in muscle tissue. So anytime you're eating muscle from an animal, be it a cow, a chicken, or a fish, you're actually getting some of that creatine. And what's really interesting is you have special receptors in your intestines specially meant to absorb creatine so it can be used and turned into phosphocreatine and give your cells some energy.
So now we mentioned that you can get creatine from animal foods, or you can produce it through amino acids, and these amino acids actually tend to be in higher abundance in animal foods as well. So if you're a vegetarian, a vegan, or a predominantly plant-based eater, you might be wondering what this means for you. Well, there is research in this area, and it turns out that when it comes to serum or blood levels of creatine, those that are vegetarian do have lower levels of creatine than those who are not vegetarian or those that are omnivores. Research even shows that those that are omnivores, if they end up going on a vegetarian diet for 21 days, that their serum levels of creatine do drop.
Additionally, people who are vegan or vegetarian also have lower muscle levels of creatine, which is kind of important because when we think about it, creatine donates that phosphate group to the ADP to make more energy. So this may have impacts on, how much energy your muscles are able to produce as a vegetarian or vegan. So we kind of given you a little bit of a background on creatine. We now know that your body produces it and you can get it from food. But there's been a lot of talk recently on supplementing with a creatine supplement, which is very redundant to say. Especially in gymfluencer spaces, fitness TikTok, fitness Instagram, I'm seeing a lot more people talking about creatine and advocating for people to supplement creatine, especially those who are very active or want to get better lifts in at the gym or want to have a better physique. There's a lot of hype around creatine.
Let's dive into the research of creatine supplements and talk about if they actually work. And specifically today, we're going to talk about creatine supplements in the context of physical strength and performance. Turns out that there's actually a wealth of scientific literature on this topic, so many meta-analyses covering all sorts of different areas of strength and performance. For example, there's one meta-analysis that looked at sprint performance.
And just a reminder, a meta-analysis is a study of a bunch of different studies. So they look at all the studies that have been published on a certain topic. In this case, it would be what is the effect of creatine supplementation on sprint performance.
This meta-analysis included 14 studies, and they found that while it didn't improve peak power output, it did improve the overall average across repeated sprint tests. Creatine, I think, is especially popular amongst those that like to lift weights and bodybuild and do a lot of strength training. And there is a lot of research in this area. There's one meta-analysis that actually included 53 studies, and it found that people's performance in their bench presses and chest presses improved through creatine supplements.
These are just a few of the studies that are out there. Creatine supplementation has been studied since at least the 80s, and there have been some studies that have shown potential benefits for recovery, aerobic capacity, work capacity, and training tolerance.
So I think a lot of times when we talk about creatine and strength and performance, our minds definitely go to bodybuilders and gym rats and, lifting iron. But believe it or not, there might be another subset of the population that may arguably benefit even more from creatine supplements, and that's older adults. As you may know, gradual and involuntary loss of lean muscle tissue is really common as we get older and older. The implication of that is that causes impairments in quality of life, overall health outcomes, as well as just being able to live independently.
What's really interesting is that some of this research that was done in the field of sports nutrition has then been translated over to this group of people for whom, having muscle mass isn't just a aesthetic thing or just a performance thing. It's actually a matter of potentially life or death, or better quality of life, or better health outcomes. There has been an increased focus on the role of creatine supplementation on muscle health in older adults. In this area as well, we've seen quite a few meta-analyses. Generally, they show very positive results for helping muscle health of older adults, specifically when they're combined with exercise. Most recently, there was a meta-analysis done of randomized control trials that looked at creatine supplements versus a placebo. And they looked at several different outcomes of muscle health in older adults. The first one that they looked at was how much lean tissue did they actually have. They found that creatine compared to placebo actually had a positive influence on muscle tissue by about over 1 kilo, which doesn't seem like that much, but when we're talking about lean tissue, that can make a world of difference for an older person, especially if they're facing a period of illness. That 1 kilogram could be the difference between disability or life and death.
This exact same meta-analysis also looked at chest press strength and leg press strength, and in both of those outcome measures, the research did find that there were improvements in those strength markers.
The ability to lift weights isn't just for having a good physique, it also can mean that these older adults can live independently longer, reduce risks for falls, can have a better quality of life.
So far it sounds like we've really hyped up creatine. So you might be wondering, well, should you be taking creatine supplements? And that's a great question. First of all, I think it is important to note that a lot of these studies are looking at not just creatine supplements, but creatine supplementation in conjunction with exercise. That physical activity piece is kind of important to be able to reap the benefits of creatine. It's kind of unclear at this point whether just taking creatine supplements without that exercise piece is necessarily going to result in the same outcome.
In a few studies in older adults, they did find that creatine supplementation alone did have some benefits on certain measures of strength, but especially in younger populations, that has not been really the case at all.
Other than that, there are definitely certain populations that might be more likely to benefit from taking creatine supplements. This includes those that are vegetarian or vegan, older adults, those that have muscle damage or muscle atrophy. There's also promising research when it comes to things like mental fatigue or those with certain mental illnesses like depression, but that's a whole other conversation, and we'll have a different video on that topic soon.
There's also some other things to consider when we're talking about any kind of supplementation, and especially supplements that are aimed at kind of the gym crowd. Generally, creatine, if you're getting it from a good source, is very, very safe. There's been countless studies on this, both in the short term and the long term, in high doses and low doses, that really show not very many side effects, not many long-term risks at all. Typically what you see are peripheral edema, which basically you hold on to water, generally transient, and also just some gastrointestinal upset, nausea, or diarrhea. There's not really research that's been done specifically on the adulteration or the contamination of creatine supplements, but as a whole, especially in the fitness and sports industry, we have seen these kinds of supplements be adulterated with things like steroids, amphetamines, or even high doses of caffeine, which may be a big issue, especially for certain groups of people. Especially if you are a professionally competing athlete who is subject to drug testing. If you're on other medications, There could be interactions that could be very dangerous. And if you have certain health conditions, if something's adulterated with something like amphetamine, that could have implications.
The things that were just highlighted, they're kind of a concern across all dietary supplements, which is why we do recommend looking for supplements that say that they're third-party tested. Ultimately, the takeaway here is that if you're someone who has the goal of improving muscle strength or performance or mobility and are also actively exercising, creatine supplements may certainly be a valuable part of your routine. However, as with anything, please do consult with a healthcare professional that is well aware of your case.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, hit the notification bell, and follow us on our Instagram and our TikTok.
Thank you for watching.
Bye!